fellow citizens of the world, brothers and sisters in arms, and all who seek justice, peace, and humanity's well-being. Today, I stand before you not just as a military leader, but as a witness to the unjust forces that threaten our future and our values. In the course of our struggle for peace and sovereignty, we have seen many leaders across the globe rise to power, some promising stability, others offering a path to a brighter tomorrow. Yet, some wield their power not for peace, but for division, destruction, and the enslavement of the very people they were meant to serve. One such leader, Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, has taken a stand not in defense of peace or the rights of the oppressed, but in the defense of an ideology that has only sowed division, suffering, and injustice. His actions, time and time again, have stood in stark contrast to the principles of equality, justice, and self-determination for all people. It is not just a matter of borders or politics. It is a matter of the very soul of our world. Netanyahu's approach to the Palestinian people, to the broader Arab world, and to those who dare question his regime's actions is nothing short of an embodiment of oppression. The bloodshed, the violence, and the disregard for international law must not go unnoticed, nor should it go unchallenged. Today, I declare unequivocally that the international community must stand firm and united against these acts of aggression and apartheid. We must send a message to those in power who choose to oppress, who choose to divide rather than unite, that their actions will not go unchallenged. It is time for us all, as global citizens, to rise, to push back, and to demand accountability. We will not stand idly by while innocent lives are taken in the name of power, and we will not allow the cycle of violence to continue. It is a global warning, a message that the actions of one man, however powerful he may seem, cannot dictate the fate of millions. We have seen the dangers of unchecked authority before, and history will not repeat itself. Our struggle for peace in Burkina Faso is not isolated. It is part of a global movement that demands fairness, justice, and a future where all people, no matter where they live or what their religion may be, can live free from fear and oppression. To Netanyahu, I say this: you do not stand alone in your actions, but you do stand against the moral conscience of the world. The global community will not allow your arrogance to dictate the lives of innocent people, nor will we let your crimes go unnoticed. We will hold you accountable, and we will continue to fight for the freedom and dignity of all people, whether they live in Palestine, in Africa, or anywhere else. And to all of you listening, I ask, what kind of world do we want to leave behind? One where power is held in the hands of a few, and where the lives of the many are disregarded for the sake of political gain? Or will we rise together as one global family to demand justice, peace, and a future where human rights are respected, regardless of race, religion, or nation? The time for passive observation has passed. It is now time for action. Let the world know that we will not allow this cycle of oppression to continue. Let the leaders of the world hear our voice, loud and clear. We will not back down. We will fight for peace, and we will win together. Thank you.
This speech is a bold and impassioned statement calling for global solidarity against the actions of Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government, particularly regarding their treatment of Palestinians and their broader geopolitical stance. The speaker, presumably Ibrahim Traoré, addresses not just the political situation in Israel, but also the wider global community's role in standing up for justice, human rights, and peace. The tone is strong, direct, and defiant. It's clear that the speaker believes Netanyahu's leadership represents an oppressive force, one that is causing division, suffering, and displacement. The fact that the speaker is from Burkina Faso adds an interesting layer to the message. He's framing this not just as a regional or national issue, but as a global struggle. The struggle for justice in Palestine, according to the speech, is tied to broader global struggles, including the fight against oppression in Africa, and the speaker positions himself as a champion of this unified cause. The speaker refers to Netanyahu's actions as embodiments of oppression and calls for a united international response. This sets the tone for the rest of the speech, which is a call for accountability and resistance to authority figures who abuse power. This is important because it sends a direct message to Israel's leadership, signaling that their actions have global consequences and will not be ignored. The speaker's point that this is not just a matter of borders or politics emphasizes that the issue transcends national interests. It's about the basic human rights of people everywhere. Another powerful point is the phrase unchecked authority, which is an implicit warning not only to Netanyahu but to any leader who might follow in his footsteps. This draws a clear line in history between those who use their power for domination and those who use it for the common good. The speaker draws a historical parallel, suggesting that we have seen the dangers of such power before and will not let it happen again. The speaker calls for action, urging people around the world to rise up, but the message isn't just about protest, it's about global unity. The focus on holding Netanyahu accountable emphasizes that this isn't about making empty statements, it's about taking concrete steps. When the speaker asks, "What kind of world do we want to leave behind?" it's a rhetorical question meant to make the audience reflect on their responsibility in shaping that world. The closing lines of the speech emphasize that this isn't just an issue for the Middle East or for certain countries, but a fight for the future of all people. The speaker doesn't want passive observers. He wants active participants in this global struggle. This is why the speech has such a universal appeal. It calls for solidarity among nations and peoples, encouraging them to unite against injustice wherever it occurs. In terms of impact, this speech would resonate most with those who already feel disillusioned with international politics, particularly in terms of perceived injustices. It would likely embolden activists, especially in regions where people are already fighting for their rights, like in Africa and parts of the Middle East. The speech could also influence leaders to take a firmer stance on global human rights issues, pressuring Israel to change its policies or at least face international scrutiny. Overall, the speech is not just an attack on Netanyahu's actions, it's an appeal to global values of justice and equality. It challenges the world to consider its moral responsibility and to take collective action in fighting oppression. This kind of rhetoric can ignite movements, but it also sets the stage for diplomatic and political shifts if leaders and governments around the world respond in kind. The speech delivered by Ibrahim Traoré is a powerful expression of defiance against the actions of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, framed within a larger global context of justice, human rights, and the fight against oppression. In essence, the speech is not just a condemnation of Netanyahu's specific policies, but a rallying cry for global solidarity against any form of authoritarianism, injustice, and exploitation. The tone is resolute and uncompromising, positioning the speaker as a leader who not only understands the lower ramifications of oppressive actions, but also feels a deep responsibility to speak out against them. The opening of the speech lays the groundwork for what follows. The speaker is not just addressing the local or national issues of his own country, Burkina Faso, but is extending the call to all those who are suffering from unjust regimes. Traore begins by stating that he speaks not just as a military leader but as a witness to the unjust forces that threaten our future. The phrasing is deliberate, emphasizing that his actions and words are born not from a desire for personal power or military dominance, but from a moral obligation to fight against forces that undermine the principles of equality and justice. The very choice to highlight future suggests that this struggle is not just for the present but for future generations. It casts the issue as one that will have lasting consequences, making the speech not only relevant but urgent. In the speech, the speaker draws direct attention to Benjamin Netanyahu, highlighting his role as the leader of Israel and his perceived complicity in policies that the speaker considers oppressive. Netanyahu is accused of being someone who, rather than fostering peace and equality, perpetuates division, suffering, and injustice. The accusation that Netanyahu's actions stand in stark contrast to the principles of equality, justice, and self-determination is one of the key themes of the speech. This reflects the speaker's deep concern about the treatment of Palestinians, and it positions Netanyahu's actions as a fundamental violation of human rights. It's important to note that this is not simply about political disagreement, but a moral condemnation of a leader whose actions, according to the speaker, directly contribute to human suffering. The speaker's critique of Netanyahu also contains an implicit call for an end to the cycle of violence in the region. The mention of bloodshed, violence, and the violation of international law is not merely a description of events, but a moral appeal to the world community to stop standing idly by. The speaker points to the long-standing history of injustice in the region, a history marked by disproportionate use of force, oppression of Palestinians, and a disregard for international calls for peace. It is here that the speech broadens its scope beyond Israel's actions to encompass the broader geopolitical context of the Middle East. While the speech addresses Israel's policies, it is equally critical of those international actors who have, by either tacit approval or indifference, enabled the status quo to continue. This brings us to the call for global unity that is at the heart of the speech. Traore's declaration that the international community must stand firm and united against these acts of aggression and apartheid is not just a critique of Netanyahu but a challenge to the world's political leaders. In essence, the speaker is saying that the failure of world powers, particularly Western nations, to hold Israel accountable for its actions has contributed to a broader culture of impunity. This is a call for action, not just from the people of Burkina Faso or Africa, but from every corner of the globe. Traore is asking the world to recognize that the oppression of Palestinians is not an isolated issue, but a part of a global struggle against tyranny, imperialism, and inequality. What makes this speech particularly striking is the way in which the speaker connects the issue of Israeli oppression to his own struggle in Burkina Faso. He uses the context of Burkina Faso's fight against terrorism and insurgencies to underscore that the struggle for justice is not confined to one region or one group of people. In fact, this is a defining feature of the speech. It places the plight of the Palestinians in a global context, making it clear that what happens in one part of the world has repercussions for everyone. The speaker's invocation of Burkina Faso's own security issues is a subtle but powerful way of suggesting that the fight against oppression is a universal struggle. By drawing this connection, Traore highlights the hypocrisy of the international community, which often turns a blind eye to oppressive actions as long as they fit into a larger geopolitical or economic agenda. The speaker's reference to unchecked authority is also significant, as it draws a historical parallel to past tyrannies. When Traore speaks about the dangers of unchecked power, he is reminding the world of the lessons of history, where regimes that were allowed to operate without accountability caused widespread suffering. The phrase unchecked authority has a double meaning. It points to Netanyahu's regime, but also serves as a warning to other world leaders who may feel emboldened by their own power. The speech frames Netanyahu's actions as a cautionary tale. If one leader is allowed to act with impunity, others may follow. This sets the stage for a much broader moral argument about the need for global accountability. One of the most striking aspects of this speech is the way the speaker turns the question of moral responsibility into a call for action. The rhetorical question, "What kind of world do we want to leave behind?" is not just a moment of reflection, but an invitation to take action. It forces the audience to think about their role in shaping the world's future. The message is clear: those who stand by and allow injustices to continue are complicit in them. In this way, the speech becomes a moral imperative, a demand for the world to choose whether it will passively accept the status quo or actively fight for change. The final call to action is perhaps the most potent moment of the speech. Traore does not simply ask people to sympathize with the Palestinian cause, he urges them to take concrete action. The phrase, "we will not stand idly by," underscores the urgency of the situation, while the declaration, "we will fight for peace," speaks to the strength of the resolve behind the words. The message is one of defiance, not just against Netanyahu, but against all forms of oppression. It is an assertion that the power of the people, when united, can overcome even the most entrenched systems of injustice. In terms of impact, this speech could resonate deeply with people already sympathetic to the Palestinian cause or to movements fighting for justice and human rights worldwide. It presents a unified vision of resistance, urging both individuals and nations to actively oppose injustice. For African leaders and activists, it provides a sense of solidarity, linking struggles in Palestine with struggles on the African continent. The speech might encourage governments to take a firmer stance on international human rights, especially when it comes to holding powerful nations and leaders accountable for violations. For Netanyahu and Israel supporters, this speech represents a direct challenge. It could place additional diplomatic pressure on Israel, forcing the government to respond to international criticism. The speech not only condemns Israeli actions, but also invites other countries to hold Israel accountable, which could lead to greater international scrutiny and sanctions. It raises the stakes for any country or institution that may choose to align itself with Netanyahu's policies, signaling that such alignment may come with significant moral and diplomatic costs. Ultimately, this speech is a call for moral clarity. It urges the global community to stand up for human rights, to resist the normalization of oppression, and to take responsibility for the future of the world. By framing the issue as a global struggle, the speaker makes it clear that this fight is not one for just one people, one nation, or one region. It is a fight for the future of humanity.
My fellow citizens, my brothers and sisters in the struggle for justice, The time has come for us to confront a truth that many wish to ignore, a truth that many have tried to bury beneath layers of diplomacy and false promises. The reality is clear. The actions of certain leaders in this world, specifically Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, have far-reaching consequences that extend beyond the borders of his nation, beyond the Middle East, and into every corner of our shared human existence. His actions are not just a threat to Palestine or to the people of the Arab world. They are a direct challenge to the values of freedom, equality, and dignity that should unite us all as human beings. Let us be clear. Netanyahu's continued policies of occupation, oppression, and violence are not just a local matter, nor are they an issue confined to the Middle East. These actions have global ramifications. His disregard for international law, his refusal to uphold the rights of the Palestinian people, and his brutal treatment of civilians stand as a stark reminder that unchecked power can lead to catastrophic consequences, not only for those directly impacted but for the whole of humanity. The world cannot afford to look away, to pretend that these injustices do not affect us all. What happens in Palestine affects us in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and in the Americas. The oppression of one people is the oppression of all people. The denial of self-determination, the destruction of homes, the loss of life, all of this sends a message to the world that those in power can act without consequence. If the international community continues to allow Netanyahu and others like him to operate without accountability, we are all complicit in their crimes. The message is clear. If we let this injustice stand, we are allowing the very fabric of human dignity to be torn apart. I speak not just as the leader of Burkina Faso, but as a citizen of this world, a person who has seen the suffering of my own people and understands the depth of what it means to live under the shadow of violence and oppression. We too have faced the scourge of terrorism and extremist violence in our own land, and we know how difficult it is to restore peace, to rebuild trust, and to heal the wounds of the past. But we also know that peace cannot be built on the suffering of others. Peace cannot come from the silencing of voices, the displacement of families, or the destruction of entire communities. True peace can only come when we choose to stand up for justice, when we choose to stand for the rights of the oppressed, wherever they may be. This is why I say to the world, it is time to take a stand against Netanyahu's actions. It is time to send a clear message that we will not tolerate violence in the name of political power. We will not tolerate the continued violation of human rights, the murder of innocent civilians, or the illegal occupation of lands. We will not accept a world where the strong trample on the weak, where the powerful are allowed to commit atrocities without consequence. We have seen enough of this kind of rule throughout history, and we have paid a high price for it. But we are no longer willing to stand by silently as innocent people suffer for the ambitions of a few. The world has a responsibility, a duty to act, to condemn these actions, and to demand justice. We must use every diplomatic tool at our disposal, every channel of influence, to challenge the systems of oppression that Netanyahu represents. We must isolate those who perpetrate violence and provide our full support to the Palestinian people, who have endured this struggle for far too long. But this struggle is not just about condemnation, it is about action. It is about showing the world that we will not stand by and let injustice unfold. We must build alliances with those who share our values, countries, organizations, and movements that are committed to human rights, peace, and the rule of law. Together, we can create the pressure needed to make Netanyahu and others like him reconsider their course of action. Together, we can create a world where justice prevails, where the lives of the oppressed are valued, and where the powerful are held accountable for their actions. Let us not be afraid to call this what it is, a fight for the future of humanity. It is a fight for the kind of world we want to leave behind for our children and grandchildren. If we allow these injustices to continue unchecked, we are complicit in their perpetuation. But if we stand together, if we raise our voices in unity, we can force change, we can end the suffering, we can create a world where all people, regardless of race, religion, or nationality, are treated with dignity and respect. I ask you today to think of the countless lives lost, the countless families torn apart, and the many generations that have been denied a chance at peace. Think of the children who will grow up knowing nothing but conflict and fear. Will we allow this to continue? Will we allow Netanyahu to dictate the future? Or will we rise to challenge him, to challenge all those who use power for oppression? The time for hesitation is over. The time for waiting for someone else to act is over. We must act, and we must act now. We must hold those in power accountable and ensure that the rights of all people are respected. To Netanyahu, I say, your actions will not go unchallenged. You may wield power for now, but your time will come. The people will rise. The world will rise. Justice will not be silenced. To the global community, I say, let us stand in solidarity with the oppressed. Let us make it clear that we will no longer tolerate the exploitation of the weak by the strong. Let us build a future of peace, where power is not used to dominate, but to uplift. And to all those suffering under the weight of injustice, to the Palestinian people and to all those who yearn for freedom, I say, your struggle is our struggle. We will fight with you, for you, and alongside you. Together we will rise, and together we will win. Thank you.
This speech, delivered by Ibrahim Traoré, is both a condemnation and a rallying cry. It starts by directly confronting the international community, urging the world to recognize the global consequences of Netanyahu's policies. The main thrust of the speech is clear. Netanyahu's actions, particularly regarding Palestine, are not isolated to the region but affect everyone. It places the plight of the Palestinian people at the center of a broader conversation about global justice, human rights, and the moral responsibility of leaders worldwide. The speech stresses that the consequences of oppression and unchecked authority aren't confined by borders. They reverberate through every society, every continent. This framing is significant because it shifts the issue from being a Middle Eastern problem to a global crisis, making it something that every person, regardless of nationality, must care about. By placing Israel's actions in this broader global context, Traoré is drawing a powerful connection between his own struggles in Burkina Faso, the broader African experience, and the experiences of the Palestinian people. He suggests that these struggles are part of a universal fight against the systems of oppression that affect marginalized communities everywhere. The reference to Burkina Faso is not just about demonstrating solidarity with Palestine, but about showing that the fight for justice, peace, and dignity is a shared one. His own country has dealt with violence, insurgency, and the challenge of restoring peace, and he uses this experience to underscore the difficulty of rebuilding after oppression. But more importantly, he uses it to argue that peace built on the suffering of others is hollow. This is a key point because it connects the dots between the injustices people face in different parts of the world, making the struggle for Palestine relatable to all who face oppression. The core of the speech is an urgent call for the international community to act, emphasizing that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Traoré is forcefully arguing that Netanyahu's government cannot be allowed to operate with impunity. His demand that the global community condemn the actions of Israel and hold its leadership accountable is not just political, it's moral. He warns that if world leaders remain passive, they are sending a message that might makes right, that power can trample human dignity without consequence. This is a significant warning as it calls attention to the dangers of allowing oppressive regimes to go unchecked. It's a challenge to global leaders to take a stronger, unified stance against Israel's policies, positioning the issue as one of global human rights and justice rather than a regional conflict. The speech also makes a powerful point about the historical lessons we should have learned by now. Traoré draws on history to remind the audience of the destructive nature of unchecked power and oppression. By using the phrase unchecked authority, he ties Netanyahu's leadership to a larger historical pattern of authoritarianism that leads to widespread suffering. The reference to history is key because it serves as both a critique of the present and a warning for the future. Traoré is suggesting that if the world does not act, we are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. The most striking part of the speech is its emotional appeal. It is clear from the tone that this is not just a political or diplomatic issue for Traoré. It's a deeply personal one. He speaks as someone who understands the pain of suffering, who knows firsthand the impact of violence and oppression. This gives his words a weight that might be absent in a more detached diplomatic statement. By invoking his own country's struggles and the shared experience of oppression, Traoré makes the issue personal to the audience, urging them to consider not just the facts but the human toll of inaction. This emotional resonance is what makes the speech more than just a critique of Netanyahu. It turns it into a universal call for justice. Moreover, Traore doesn't just focus on the suffering of the oppressed, he also focuses on the power of the people to change the course of history. The speech is a call to action, urging individuals and governments to stop being passive observers and to become active participants in the fight for justice. When he says we must act and we must act now, it's a direct challenge to anyone who might think that this issue does not concern them. The urgency in this statement is palpable. It emphasizes the idea that there is no more time for waiting, no more time for watching from the sidelines. The future of humanity, Traore argues, depends on whether or not we choose to stand up against oppression. Another notable aspect of this speech is the emphasis on global solidarity. Traore makes it clear that this is not just about standing with the Palestinian people, it's about creating a global movement for justice. His call for a united front against Netanyahu and similar regimes signals a shift in how global conflict should be approached. Rather than letting powerful nations act unilaterally, Traore suggests that the world needs to come together and use collective power to challenge injustice. This emphasis on unity is not just about Palestinians or Israelis, it's a call to the whole world to act in concert against those who abuse power. The speech is also very strategic in its framing. By focusing on the human rights abuses and violations of international law, it forces the international community to confront the fact that supporting or ignoring Netanyahu's actions is complicity in human rights violations. He lays bare the hypocrisy of those who claim to stand for human rights but are silent when those rights are trampled underfoot by powerful nations. This is a pointed critique of the status quo, where geopolitical interests often outweigh moral considerations. Traore's words challenge the world to reconsider what kind of global order it wants, one that rewards might and suppresses justice, or one that upholds the dignity of all people. In terms of impact, this speech serves to strengthen movements for Palestinian rights, global justice, and accountability. It would resonate particularly with those who already feel disenfranchised or oppressed by global power structures, such as activists in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. For people in Burkina Faso, it ties their struggle against insurgency and terrorism to the broader global fight for justice. By positioning himself as both a leader of a country in conflict and a global voice for justice, Traore amplifies his credibility, offering solidarity to the Palestinians while reminding the world that peace cannot be achieved through the subjugation of others. On a diplomatic level, the speech challenges Israel's international relationships. By directly calling out Netanyahu, Traore risks further antagonizing the Israeli government and potentially worsening diplomatic relations with other countries that support Israel. However, the speech also provides a chance for governments worldwide to reflect on their stance toward Israel, offering them an opportunity to reassess their support for a government accused of widespread human rights abuses. The speech is also likely to ignite a broader global conversation about the role of international law, the United Nations, and other organizations in holding powerful nations accountable for their actions. Traore's insistence on international accountability raises the stakes for Israel and for any country that might follow in Netanyahu's footsteps. It calls for global governance to reflect moral values rather than the political and economic power of a few. Ultimately, this speech is an important statement of defiance, an urgent appeal to the global community to recognize their moral responsibility in the face of injustice. It connects global struggles, elevates the issue of Palestinian rights to a universal cause, and challenges us all to act in the name of justice, dignity, and peace. Ibrahim Traoré's speech is a bold and impassioned declaration against the actions of Benjamin Netanyahu and his government, particularly in regard to the Israeli treatment of Palestinians. At its core, this speech is not just a condemnation of one nation's leadership, but a universal call for justice, human rights, and accountability. Through his words, Traoré positions himself not only as a leader speaking for his own country, Burkina Faso, but as a voice for global solidarity in the fight against oppression and inequality. This speech transcends regional concerns, inviting the entire world to reflect on its moral duty to act against systemic injustice wherever it occurs. From the very beginning, Traore makes clear that the issue at hand is not just a localized or Middle Eastern problem, it is a global issue. He confronts the international community, urging them to recognize that Netanyahu's actions do not only impact Palestinians, but also reverberate across the world. He connects the oppression of the Palestinian people to broader struggles for freedom and self-determination, including the ongoing battles faced by African nations, particularly Burkina Faso and other marginalized communities. This framing shifts shifts the discourse from a narrow geopolitical conflict to a broader human rights issue that concerns every person, regardless of their nationality or race. Traore argues that the actions of Netanyahu in Israel are symptomatic of a larger, more dangerous pattern of unchecked power and human rights abuses, which if left unchallenged will continue to undermine global justice. At the heart of the speech is a call for global unity in confronting these abuses of power. Traore urges the world to take collective responsibility for addressing the actions of the Israeli government, specifically calling on global leaders to hold Netanyahu accountable for violating international law, committing acts of violence, and denying Palestinians their basic human rights. This plea is not merely diplomatic but deeply moral. The speaker insists that silence and inaction on the part of international leaders is complicit in the oppression that Palestinians face daily. He directly challenges world powers, particularly those in the West, for their complicity in supporting or enabling Israel's policies. Traore is clear in his message. It is not enough to make statements of condemnation. Action is required. Governments, organizations, and citizens must unite to demand accountability, impose sanctions, and take tangible steps to stop the cycle of violence and injustice. One of the key elements of Traore's speech is the historical context he draws upon to frame the situation. He speaks of the dangers of unchecked authority, pointing to the destructive consequences of allowing powerful leaders and nations to act with impunity. By invoking the historical record of tyrannical regimes and authoritarian governments, Traore positions Netanyahu's leadership as part of a broader pattern of oppression. The implication is clear: if world leaders allow one regime to act without consequence, they are opening the door for other authoritarian leaders to follow suit. This warning serves as both a critique of Netanyahu's government and a cautionary tale for the international community. The speech highlights the dangers of complacency in the face of injustice, urging the world not to repeat the mistakes of the past. However, Traore's argument is not solely about holding Netanyahu accountable. It is also about the larger moral responsibility of the international community. He argues that the oppression of Palestinians is a reflection of a global failure to uphold human rights. This point is particularly important because it shifts the conversation from a bilateral issue between Israel and Palestine to a global conversation about the moral foundations of the international system. By urging world leaders to take a firm stance against Netanyahu's policies, Traore calls into question the effectiveness of international institutions such as the United Nations, which have often been criticized for their failure to intervene decisively in situations of human rights violation. He is demanding that the world prove its commitment to the principles of justice, equality, and self-determination, not just in words but through concrete actions. The speech also has a deeply emotional and personal dimension. Traore speaks not just as a political leader, but as someone who has experienced the suffering of his people. He speaks from the perspective of a nation that has faced violence, instability, and terror, and he draws a parallel between the struggles of his own people and those of the Palestinians. This personal connection to the subject matter adds weight to his words. It is one thing to speak about injustice from a distance. It is another to speak from a place of personal knowledge and experience. Traore's message is not just an abstract political argument. It is a plea for humanity, a plea for the dignity of all people, and a call for the world to stand with the oppressed. This personal appeal is central to the emotional power of the speech. By connecting the struggles of the Palestinian people to the broader fight for justice and freedom, Traore not only elevates the cause of Palestine, but makes it a cause for all who fight for human rights. His speech is a reminder that the struggle for freedom is not confined to one people, one country, or one region. It is a universal struggle that unites all who believe in the dignity of the human person. This framing is particularly important because it places the oppression of Palestinians within the context of other global struggles, including those in Africa, Asia, and other parts of the world. It is a call to action for people everywhere to recognize their shared responsibility to fight for justice and against oppression. The speech's most powerful moment comes when Traore calls for action. The urgency in his words is palpable. He emphasizes that this is not a time for waiting, for diplomacy without consequence, or for empty promises. The world must act now, or the injustices will continue to grow. His call for action is not just about government leaders. It is a call to all people, to all activists, to all citizens of the world, to rise up and demand justice. He stresses that the future of humanity depends on the choices made today. If the world allows Netanyahu's government to continue unchecked, it will set a dangerous precedent for future generations. generations. However, if the world unites in a concerted effort to demand accountability and end the violence, then there is hope for a more just and peaceful future. This is not a fight for Palestine alone. Traore insists, it is a fight for the future of humanity. Another crucial element of Traore's speech is the emphasis on global solidarity. He urges nations, organizations, and individuals to come together in the fight against oppression. This emphasis on unity reflects a broader vision for the world, one in which countries and peoples collaborate to uphold human rights and justice. It underscores the importance of collective action in addressing global challenges. By positioning this struggle as a shared responsibility, Traore invites others to join a global movement for justice, reinforcing the idea that no one is exempt from standing up against oppression. In terms of impact, this speech has the potential to influence both public opinion and diplomatic policy. By framing the issue in moral terms, Traore speaks directly to the conscience of the world. His words challenge not only government leaders but also ordinary people to reconsider their complicity in global injustices. The speech could strengthen international movements advocating for Palestinian rights and human rights more broadly, particularly among activists who are already engaged in struggles for justice and equality. It could also influence global diplomacy, encouraging nations to reassess their relationships with Israel and to hold it accountable for its actions. The speech's emphasis on solidarity and collective action may also inspire new international coalitions focused on addressing human rights abuses in Israel and elsewhere. Ultimately, Traore's speech is more than just a condemnation of Netanyahu. It is a call for a new global order based on justice, equality, and the protection of human rights. It challenges the international community to confront the reality of oppression, to take responsibility for its actions, and to unite in the fight for a better, more just world. His words inspire hope that through collective action, change is possible and that the future can be one of peace, dignity, and shared humanity.